Well, for those who may have just joined, I'm Dr. Christina Bellamy. I was born and raised here in Anchorage. I am an educator. I am also a very joyful disruptor of systems of oppression, the status quo, and things that continue to create barriers for learning and opportunity for people of underrepresented communities. How could that learning and those experiences that you talked about, how could that help shift our institutions or help shift the some thinking that we may have as individuals?
Well, just to contextualize this in a much larger way, to begin with. I mean, for many, people of color, Black and Indigenous peoples, this country has always been, just a dangerous, traumatizing place. Our daily lives can be potentially traumatic because of the racism that permeates every system and institutions in this country, including the educational system. Right. And so we are not, in addition to that, we are not just worried about the racism that we might directly face, but we are also burdened by the racism that our ancestors faced. Right. So there's historical racism as well. There's historical trauma as well, and the effects of historical trauma, is very real. They are tangible. They can literally kill us, right? So we are affected by both contemporary racism and historical racism, and the resulting worries and anxieties and paranoia and depression and sense of helplessness, sense of hopelessness, sense of defeat. They are still very damaging to us. It damages our well-being, our self-esteem, our mental health, our physical health, our ability to do our jobs, our ability to do our schoolwork, our ability to go to school. So if we truly, genuinely want to be culturally responsive, right, then we must address the racism in all aspects of society, because it is the racism that really affects peoples of color every day. But in our schools, our true history is not just forgotten or erased. It is even distorted, and it's distorted in a way that dehumanizes us. Right. So for our schools, then, if we truly, genuinely care about our students' well-being and school performance, then we will prioritize addressing racism, because, it is the root of why so many students are struggling.
Hey, Ian, I want to hear from you on this as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would second the points EJ made. I mean, it was a brilliant commentary, and I'd only add that I think when thinking about history, you can go down a couple different pathways here. And I think when we're trying to impart a narrative on students, there's maybe two separate ways that I see this going too often. And the first way which is to just really do violence to students by not talking about certain things, or not really talking about the history of racism, the history of land theft, the history of slavery, all of this. And it's and that happens. And I think it's a huge risk. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of, and just kind of as basic cultural competency, move away. On the other hand, I do sometimes, I wonder if we have to, you have to teach the history of racism and the foundations of the country, but you also have to teach resistance and resilience. And so, I think when we're trying to really grapple with history and grapple with trauma, we want to be careful to emphasize the history of racism and systemic racism and the way in which these structures kind of loop through the past and into the present. But we also need to be very careful, I think, to highlight resistance to those same systems, and to really make sure that those who have resisted are at the forefront of a narrative. I mean, but by all means, we talk about slavery, but we talk about Nat Turner, right? We just had the Democratic National Convention. We talk about the history of racism in politics, but we talk about Fannie Lou Hamer and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. So I think there's an opportunity there to do both of these things at once, which is to engage a serious, substantive discussion about race and trauma, but to also do so in a way that allows for that empowerment. And I think that's really, institutionally, at least, I think that's what we can do. Individually, I hope we can do that as well. But that would be, I think, maybe a good place to start. A little bit about myself. I am a professor of history at UAA. I came to Alaska for what was supposed to be 1 year. I think it's a common story. This was back in 2011. And long story short, I've been here for about 10 years, and it's been a wonderful ride, but it's of course been up and down at the university.